The Mandalorian and Grogu is officially out, and there's a lot of discussion flying at 100 miles per hour about this movie, and I'm really interested to get into this discussion because I quite like the movie. I really did. The reception of this movie has been kind of puzzling because if you look at the critics, they're kind of meh. If you look at the fan reception on a lot of these websites, they're solid. But if you go look in social media, especially in comment sections, you will have complaints everywhere. When it comes to negativity, people always say that you will only find what you are looking for, but the problem is if you spend any time in the Star Wars fandom, you're going to realize very, very quickly, negativity will find you even when you really, really don't want it to. I had posted a short form review about this movie and was mostly positive with definite criticisms, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. And I still had people calling me a corporate shill, I had people calling me a paid influencer, which number one, being called an influencer, I guess, I'll take it. But it's gotten to the point where as someone who didn't receive a PR box from Disney or Lucasfilm, who hasn't received any premiere invites, any early screening invites, I watched this movie on my own accord, paid for my own ticket. So I'm going to give you my honest thoughts in this video because there is no reason, I'm not on any PR list, there's absolutely not a single reason for me to speak positively about this movie other than the fact that I actually, genuinely, surprisingly guys, enjoyed it. For starters, I'm just going to go over the plot, so if you haven't seen the movie or you're avoiding spoilers, now would be the time to just leave, maybe come back later, because I will be talking about the plot in its entirety. That being said, there's not really much of one, and that's not a bad thing. From the initial marketing of this movie, it came off as just an adventure, and I do understand people's criticisms when they are frustrated with that, because it is 7 years since we've last seen Star Wars in the box office. So I can completely understand people are desperate, people are really wanting a theater experience, but this does not move the grand plot for Star Wars or the Star Wars universe further, and that is okay. As long as you know that ahead of time, and you are okay with that, you can look at this movie with a completely different approach. The Mandalorian Grogu plot is extremely straightforward and simple. Din Djarin and Grogu are essentially paid bounty hunters for the New Republic. Sigourney Weaver hires the Mandalorian to find the location of a former Imperial warlord, and in order to get that information from the Hutt twins, they have to go rescue, or kidnap, more on that later, Rada the Hutt. The Mandalorian and Grogu go and rescue Rada, and then find out that the arms broker was actually the Imperial warlord the whole time. So they go get Rada, and then they go get this warlord, and then they show up. Din then decides it wouldn't be wise to take Rada back to his family. Din sends him off into hiding, and that's where the first episode of this movie kind of concludes. From this point, Din gets captured by Embo. Embo brings him to the Hutts. They talk it out. He throws him into the pit like they do in very, very Hutt fashion. Grogu, along with a bunch of Anzellans, go on a really cute little adventure to then go try to rescue Din. They get to Din, just a little too late because Din was bitten by this giant snake, dragon, monster thing, whatever. Looked really cool. And the Anzellans make a break for it. Grogu stays behind and helps Din, nurses him back to health, force heals him, all that. And then they decide, you know what, screw it. We're going to launch an attack back on the Hutts and take out these slugs for good. And that's what they do. Plot's very straightforward. We found out that the Hutts eventually had also gotten Rada back, and so there's, I guess, some emotional weight from that. Din takes on the Hutts. The New Republic comes in for backup. They blow the Hutts to smithereens. They get out of there. Everyone goes home happy. It's a very simple and very straightforward plot. Now let's talk about what I liked. In the beginning of the movie, I was really happy with the action sequence that we kicked off with. It felt fast-paced. It felt like there's no introduction. This is just bam. This is Din Djarin beating up stormtroopers. This is so freaking cool. I loved the one-shot approach they tried to take with this. I know in modern Hollywood that a lot of scenes that are one-shot aren't actually one-shot, but regardless, whether it was hidden or not, this was incredibly well done. The physicality that Lateef Crowder and Brendan Wayne bring to The Mandalorian is such an amazing thing to see on the big screen. They've always done incredible on TV, but this looked so good. This one felt extremely fun because it felt like, for me personally, you know, it reminded me of my days as a kid with my Jango Fett action figure blowing up AT-ATs or whatever. Ridiculous, I know, but it was a lot of fun. This scene also, and the rest of the movie, did a fabulous job of making Din Djarin look absolutely badass. There are a lot of modern movies that like to make their hero either look weaker and then build up throughout the entire film, but Din, outside of his initial fight with Embo where he was caught off guard, looked really cool and really competent the entire movie. I also forgot to mention that I thought this was incredibly cool that Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder got credit. They got opening credit for The Mandalorian. Seeing those guys get billed so quickly was really cool because Star Wars unfortunately has a habit of taking a lot of the body actors, the behind the scenes guys, and not really giving them the initial credit that they deserve. While that doesn't necessarily have to do with the plot or the actual review of the movie, just a really cool thought. I was super happy about that. The physical comedy, the comedy overall in this movie, I can definitely hear people out when they say that it was too much, but for me, it was fine. I understood the tone of the movie, and I was really, really okay with how they carried most of the script and a lot of the comedy that went with it. I love Ardenians. I did not know it was voiced by Martin Scorsese until after the fact, but it was really funny. His time, while short, really, really funny. We also get taken to a planet where we initially find Rada named Shikari, or at least that might have been the city name, and it is straight up Space Chicago. They're not hiding that. The name is on the nose. Whatever. It looked really cool. We then go into a bar fight where Din Djarin goes after and wants to get more information about Rada. And the bar fight was so well done. The physicality was awesome, and the badassery with everything that happened in that scene. Incredible. I love the physical choreography that we get when Mandalorians actually fight. It is extremely hard to move in that armor. Trust me, I know. So to see talented stunt work and really cool choreography, it reminds me a lot of my days of imagining bounty hunters like Jango or Boba Fett actually doing and getting dirty work. I also thought the comedic timing of just certain pieces of dialogue were really incredible and really memorable. I love about Boba Fett and Mandalorians that they always have these punch one-liners that really hit you.
You are a clone. I've heard your voice thousands of times.
Mine might be the last one you hear.
Very simple line, but it's cold, it's menacing, and those are the type of moments I remember. We got that quite frequently in this movie, and I absolutely loved. This was so cool. Din Djarin walks out of that guy's office with the salt, and then he drops it in the drink of the guy that he just kicked his ass. Like it was incredible. He also told that same guy that he got the information from that he tries to avoid violence. Really funny. Really simple, really straightforward. It's not really that complicated dialogue, but it fits the Mandalorian well. I know this is very, very obvious and blatant fan service, but in the arena fight, I know that it was off of the board game. I get it. I know all those animals were just directly ripped from that. I really liked it. Yes, I completely understand that it's fan service and it was a CGI fest, but when it comes to Star Wars, as time has gone on, my suspension of disbelief for a lot of CGI related things has started to kind of fly. I grew up as a prequel kid, so there's a lot that I can tolerate. Going on from this point, they rescue Rada. They then double back and go after the Imperial Warlord. The entire scene where he goes throughout his house and just basically they just take care of all of the people in there. Zeb gets in on this fight. Really well done. I loved every second of that. From that point, we get Din Djarin, who goes back to his homeworld, goes back to his house, and starts fixing his ship. And I will say, pacing-wise, this is where it felt like very specifically, a lot of people are saying that this movie feels like Mandalorian episodes spliced together, and this is the only time where I really felt I'm like, okay, I can see it here. The Anzellans help fix Din Djarin's ship. I don't care what anyone says. They're a lot of comedy. They're adorable. They're really fun. I love their voices. I love every single thing about them. I want more screen time for the Anzellans. Din Djarin then gets kidnapped by Embo, and they have this short little, I don't want to say fight, but he draws Din out, traps him. Grogu gets off to safety by himself, and Embo looked so cool in the scene. The lighting and the rain. Yes, he's a CGI character, but regardless, didn't matter. Embo looked absolutely badass in live action, and I'm glad we finally got to see him. He looked really good. Din then gets flown out, goes in front of the huts. They remove his helmet, and he sits in front of the huts. They talk it out. Doesn't go well, and he gets thrown into the pit in exact hut fashion. Whatever. He fights these initial aliens. I don't recall their names off the top of my head. Does pretty well against them with his staff. I also really loved about this scene is that we finally see Pedro Pascal getting dirty. He has action in the suit. You've heard so many people talk about The Mandalorian and how Pedro Pascal doesn't spend much time in the suit, and even if he didn't in this movie, it was nice to see a full actual scene dedicated to Pedro being suited up. Not only that, in a water tank. He got dirty. Fight was cool. I loved the beast. From this point, also, I'm not remembering the timeline, but I know that Grogu had a really cool suit-up scene where he was going to rescue Mandalorian. He got his gauntlets on, he got his armor, he tightened it up. So freaking cool. Also completely forgot to mention that Grogu, throughout this entire movie, whether he was a physical puppet or CGI, looked really, really good. The shots where you could tell that he was a puppet, you couldn't really tell unless you just have that eye. He looked so good. He was adorable throughout the entire time. I loved his screen time. He was cute. Don't care what anyone says, I'm a sucker for cute things on screen. He was awesome. We then get this scene where the Anzellans escape, Grogu stays behind with Din, as I'd already mentioned, and we get a little bit of screen time specifically dedicated to Grogu. Grogu kind of has this scene that is reminiscent of Yoda, where he then builds his little hut and shelter. He also picks up a Yoda walking stick, and I'm going to talk about more of that and the things that I don't like in just a second, but a lot of that scene was fun, it was enjoyable. Some of the music was beautiful. It was some of my favorite pieces of the entire soundtrack. And then they're off on their merry way back to go fight the Hutts. Now, I'm actually really grateful for this scene because my fascination with Star Wars, I have never understood how Hutts, how these slugs, who absolutely do nothing, just sit there, have amassed all this power that they have. It's always bothered me. I don't know why someone just doesn't, we don't have to take orders from you. Let's just go smoke them. And so it was finally nice to see something inner inside of me that I've always just been so desperate to see. Is someone just smoking these guys? Like, I'm so tired of the Hutts. I'm sorry. They go and they fight. The Mandalorian fights Embo. Really great stunt work there. The Hutts then have their own little wrestling fight over the big pit. It didn't look great, admittedly, and I'm going to talk more about that later. But I guess it was okay. I also forgot to mention, and I was absolutely in love with Tibbet Studios. The droids, the big guard robots that were out in front of the Hutts room, were stop motion. And it was obvious, but it was beautiful. It was cool. It felt like I was watching something from old Hollywood, and not in a bad way. So cool and so well done. There was also beautiful music, and Rada was lifted out of the pit. The music, awesome. Grogu, it's glad to see his force powers kind of escalating just a little bit further. It's nice development. Not saying we got a lot this movie, but it's something. I was also really happy about the X-Wings. I love seeing X-Wings in action. They came back, they flew in, they looked badass. They did their job. I love seeing bombers in action. Y-Wings are so underrated. They go back, they talk it out. A lot of cute dialogue. It was fun. That's what I liked. And now what I don't like. And I am so sorry in advance because as someone who's going to give this movie an overall positive rating, there's still a lot to criticize here. Now I do apologize when these criticisms, these are just my personal opinions, these are not attacks, these are not anything like that, but I definitely have criticisms from this movie because it was not perfect, and I think we as Star Wars fans need to be able to comfortably acknowledge that even though we may enjoy something, we can respectfully voice the problems because they exist in this movie. Here we go. What I hate to say, and I absolutely love Ludwig's work. He's an incredible composer, but I think his time with Star Wars has gotten a little bit more hype than it deserves, and I know that's a hot take. I know. Believe me. That's not popular. Everyone that I've ever talked to absolutely loves this guy's work. But I've got problems. When it comes to the intro theme for this movie, I felt that it was almost too similar to the TV show's intro. And yeah, granted, it's the Mandalorian theme, but I would have really loved to see an orchestral oomph, like some really powerful, strong theme. The same theme still, nonetheless, but I wanted just a little bit more of a punch, something more orchestral, something more grand, to really set home the fact that this is a movie. And I need to do a re-listen, but as far as I was noticing in the theater, it didn't really feel that much different. It still felt like, okay, here's the theme you know and love from the TV show. Bam. Here you go. And it's a great theme. Don't get me wrong, I just wanted a little bit more of an orchestral punch. My immediate problem with this movie is that the movie felt extremely sterile. I had this problem with a lot of The Mandalorian because it is shot on a digital background. But what Andor and Rogue One, and I know a lot of people freak out when you make comparisons, but I just gotta say, it was great. So hold on a second, let me do it. What I loved about Andor and Rogue One is that is a project that felt like there was a real budget to it. You could see Cassian Andor interacting with all these amazing physical sets. The backgrounds and everything felt really great. And so for The Mandalorian to finally get its big screen debut, and they go back to a lot of the techniques that people have kind of voiced that they're really, I don't want to say annoyed with, but kind of over. I really wish that they had put more of an emphasis on physical sets and props because we didn't get a lot of that in this movie. Straight up, that's that. This really stuck out to me when we went inside the New Republic base, which is really funny because it might be one of the only real big physical sets, but I very, very straightforwardly noticed that the entire base felt sterile. It almost looked like a hospital. I don't know if it was partially the lighting or something like that, but it literally was just pounding you. It almost looked like there was an atomic explosion taking place 2 miles away, like it was in Oppenheimer. The lighting was it was blinding. And I'm looking around, everyone's uniforms look extremely clean, the base looks clean. And I don't know if you've ever been on a military base. As someone who was formerly in, I'm going around and I've never even seen an on-base military hospital look that clean. And this also kind of carries on throughout the rest of the movie. Even though if they're in a cave or they're in a lot of scenes where there would be a lot of dirt and grime, it just felt too sanitized. I don't know. That's just me. I also noticed when Din first arrives on Al Hutta, and this extremely bothered me because it stuck out, Din walks past all of these droids. Now, of course, they're not really physical props, and if they were, great. But regardless, he walks past all of these really unique, mashed-up type droids. He walks past all of them. And in Star Wars, for example, like the cantina scene, or any time that we've gone into a setting where there's going to be a lot of that Star Wars weirdness, we get really great establishing shots. Sometimes it's close-ups. Sometimes it's shots that are directly focused on these weird costumes, these weird aliens. Din walks by all of these fascinatingly cool droids, and we don't even get a single shot focusing on them at all. We see them in the background, out of focus, walking by. We do not get a single dedicated shot on a droid. And I feel like that was a missed opportunity. What makes Star Wars so popular, especially in the fandoms, and what makes the longevity of Star Wars exist as it does, is you have a lot of fandoms who see stuff in the background or see these weird things in 2-second shots and you're like, I want to make that. I want to make a prop out of that. I want to make a droid. I want to display that at a convention. For whatever reason, some of these things just make these people tick. And so I was incredibly disappointed that we walked by all these really cool droids and didn't really get any look at them. I also have to say, as they were going into Space Chicago, I know this is such a hot take because everyone loves his work. I'm so sorry. I didn't like the synth trap music that they had flying into Chicago. I didn't. That's just me. I know some people think it's a vibe. It's a bop. People are currently listening to it. I just didn't like it. It stuck out to me. Was not my thing. Hot take. I know a lot of people like it. I'm sorry. We finally meet up with Rada on Space Chicago, and oh my god, I don't know what about this just didn't work for me. I don't know if it was the voice acting performance from a really good actor.
I'm my own man, and I'm not afraid to fight for what I have.
Seemingly almost phoned in, or if it was just the fact that a Hutt spoke regular and perfect English. There's just something about it where my suspension of weirdness and disbelief when it comes to Star Wars There's a lot of weird stuff, granted, but it all fits in kind of this bubble. And when it comes to Rada the Hutt speaking perfectly, and then he goes into talking about his feelings and how I'm a much better person than my dad. I tried to take it seriously, but something just seemed really off to me. I don't know if it was the fact that Hutt was so eloquent, and we're just not used to that, but something about this Hutt didn't sit well with me. And continuing on with the Hutts, I also really didn't like the Hutt twins in the way they were shot, the way they were portrayed. It just didn't hit with me. I feel bad comparing it to one of the greatest puppets of all time, but Jabba the Hutt worked because he was disgusting. The way he was shot, it was larger than life. We got these up-close, zoomed-in shots of his large, wide head. You really were intimidated by his size. You were disgusted. You were grossed out. With these Hutts, they just seemed too personable. They seemed too clean. They seemed too relaxed. There was not really much disgusting factor there. They were just kind of there. And they had voices, and that's fine. They were nice, but I just didn't feel the intimidation factor that I did from Jabba the Hutt. I wasn't grossed out by these guys, and that was kind of disappointing. I think just like a lot of the movie, they looked too clean. I also have to mention this, and this is also going to be a hot take because I've already seen discourse about this on Twitter, but I was really bothered by Dave Filoni's cameo. And hold on, hear me out for just a second. Yes, I do understand that George Lucas had appeared in his movies and it had cameos before. Completely understand that. Lots of directors and creatives have cameos in their own movies. But my problem here is when George Lucas had his cameos in live-action Star Wars, you had to look for it. I did not know that George Lucas was in live-action Star Wars until many years later, and even then rewatching the scene, I still missed it because it is extremely hard to notice he's even there. He's blended in and he's done extremely well. Problem is with Dave Filoni's cameo is we walk into this Republic base and he's sitting there, smirking, and the camera is directly on him for what felt like eternity. Granted, that's an over-exaggeration, but this cameo, it felt smug. Like, it wasn't like a hidden, like, oh, I'm looking and I'm seeing Anthony Daniels in a crowd of surprised people, or I'm seeing, like, Ahmed Best also in that same crowd. Like, it wasn't like that. This was a camera shot directly on the man smiling, looking smug. And I love Dave Filoni. I love him. This doesn't come from a place of distaste or anger or disappointment. I love Dave Filoni. It didn't sit right with me. I also have to say, and this is the first time that the movie had pacing issues for me, but once the Mandalorian got poisoned and he was down and laying in that log, I really felt like the movie dragged so long until we got back into the action. I like Grogu's screen time, and I was really happy with everything that happened with him there, but there was, I don't know if it was certain shots, but like we got the nighttime moving on, like it felt like it was going on for eternity. I also hate to say it, but a lot of the general audience, maybe some won't, but most people knew that Grogu could force heal. And now granted, that doesn't immediately solve the poison problem, but we knew, number one, nothing was going to happen to either of these characters. It's not that type of movie. We all knew that. And so the attempt at suspense just really didn't hit with me, and that's also what I think kind of made the scene drag on a little bit longer. I really wish I could suspend my disbelief, but like there's just certain things where I'm like, okay, come on, y'all. We know nothing's going to happen. And you can still have quality suspense when you know that these characters won't be harmed. I was on the edge of my seat when Din Djarin was in that water tank fighting that big snake beast. It was a cool scene, and it was action-packed, and it kept me interested in where the story was going. I knew he was going to win that fight, or at least get out of it, but there's different types of suspense you can get away with when it's kind of obvious where the character is going to go. I'm also, and I'm going to say this, what bothers me about this composer is I feel he is incredibly fearful of reusing Star Wars themes and motifs. I don't know why. I don't think he likes doing it, and let me talk about that. I first noticed this in Mandalorian Season 2 when Luke Skywalker charges down this hallway with all these droids slashing through looking incredibly heroic. And when I first watched the scene, I was absolutely enthralled at seeing Luke Skywalker back for the first time in his true form in cinema for years. But the problem was, and I feel like I was the only one that noticed this, is the soundtrack for that hallway scene was extremely strange. Luke has an established theme, whether it's the Force or any other types of themes. He has themes that are attached to his name, and you could have beautifully, cinematically tied that into that hallway scene. But instead, and I'm going to play it real quick, you get this really awkward silence through a lot of that hallway scene. Really loud string sections and there's blasts and whatever, blah blah blah, but so much of it is just empty noise, and it's really strange because this is an emotional moment. We've just been building it up. We saw Luke Skywalker fly in, walk through the other hallways, and we finally get to the climax, the pinnacle moment where he's fighting through these droids, and the soundtrack is just odd to me. Now granted, that theme does get reused when he walks in and talks to Din Djarin and Grogu, but in the hallway I would have loved just a little bit more of an impact and a punch, something to really sell home the emotion that yes, this is the Luke Skywalker that fans have always wanted to see. We're getting him back. It's so freaking cool. And we didn't really get any of that. Fast forward to the Mandalorian and Grogu, we get Yoda grabbing a stick, a walking stick. Very reminiscent of Yoda, walking through the ponds, walking through the swamps. And I completely understand people not wanting fan service. I do. But when there's already a moment on screen that is so very specifically dedicated to bringing in an emotion of like, oh, we're seeing Grogu act very similar to Yoda, and it was intentional, don't be afraid to use a theme to also help invoke that emotion on the audience. I would have loved, even if it was just for a few brief seconds, to get Yoda's theme. Even a few notes. Something that's very obvious, goes along with him grabbing that stick. It would have been incredible, and it would have sold a lot of people's emotions, but instead we didn't get that. And the sad thing is the scene, the music, is so beautifully well written throughout that entire time. And I can completely understand a composer who wants to respect where he came from and not really include much of that and try to create his own identity. But the problem is, you're not playing in the Ludwig universe, you're playing in the Star Wars universe. I get where you're coming from, but you cannot be afraid to use themes and motifs, especially when the movie is going out of its way to make callbacks. You can't be afraid. Everyone, this is actually Noah from the future real quick as I'm putting on the last editing touches of this video. It's really crazy. I watched the Star Wars and the Mandalorian and Grogu final trailer, and I just noticed they actually did use Yoda's theme, and they started off with Grogu sitting in the forest. Like, if we go, just look at this trailer real quick. It immediately starts with the Yoda theme. I'm not even kidding.
We've all heard stories of the Mandalorian bounty hunter and a child.
So I'm just sitting here wondering, if they had no problem including it for the trailer, why couldn't we just even for a few brief seconds include it for the actual scene? Why? The last I'm going to talk about Ludwig in this movie, and this is where I had an extreme problem as well, is when the X-Wings flew in, we could have gotten the Rebellion theme, we could have even gotten John Williams' X-Wing theme from Force Awakens, but instead, when the X-Wings finally fly in on Al Hutta, even though for like the first 10 to 15, 20 seconds of that X-Wing fly-in scene is just the X-Wings, and we don't see Din until a cut after that, we get the Mandalorian's theme as the X-Wings are flying in, and that's puzzling to me. Because you have so many different opportunities to use the Rebellion theme, the or like whatever, and we get the Mandalorian's theme to show off the X-Wings flying in. I don't get it. I don't know if my complaints about Ludwig's music are just from a boomer perspective or as someone who is a violinist and has participated in orchestral music throughout his entire life. But the thing that I love about Star Wars is the orchestra, a full symphony, just the boom, the power for it. And when we have heroic moments, we can't be afraid to use that. And we can't be afraid to use themes that are already well established in this universe and attached to the identities of X-Wings, of the Rebellion, whatever. Please don't be afraid to reuse themes and motifs. I think Michael Giacchino did it in an incredible way in Rogue One, which is one of my favorite soundtracks. Absolutely outstanding. All in all, the discourse surrounding this movie has been really interesting because from some perspectives, I can see why people were unhappy. This is the first time that we got Star Wars back in 7 years, and when people see Star Wars movies on the big screen, their entire lives for the past almost 50 years now, they've expected something big. They've expected something grand. And so I can understand why a lot of people would be disappointed at the notion of just a simple, fun adventure movie coming out. But I've also seen a lot of people compare this to Indiana Jones, and I didn't see that at first, but after some short thoughts, I love the comparisons. I see the comparisons, and I think they're incredible. You could also complain that there's not a lot of character development or a lot of movement within the actual Star Wars universe, and I completely understand where you're coming from. I get that aspect. I'm not saying I agree with it, and I'm not saying that I actually disagree with criticism. I just don't think every single movie or adventure needs to have an incredible amount of character development. That is okay. Disney kind of put themselves in an interesting position because you have a Tin Man who can't really emote much with his face, and you have a toddler. How are you going to really develop emotionally those two very much? But with that being said, The Mandalorian and Grogu are the perfect duo for an adventure type movie because you don't have to worry about emotional character development. You don't have to worry about the direction they're going. You can sit back and you can have fun and you can watch cool fights, and it feels very much like an Indiana Jones movie. I also have to say confidently that this is an excellent movie to introduce your kids to Star Wars with. A lot of this plot felt like it would be perfect for a video game, and that's also because when I think of The Mandalorian, I very fondly remember my days of playing Star Wars Bounty Hunter, and what so strongly came off about this movie is this is just a fun little story where I can appreciate a really cool guy in really cool armor flying around looking badass with his son, doing really cool stuff and seeing certain sides of the galaxy that we either haven't seen enough of or haven't seen much of yet. Would I really like the Star Wars universe to try to continue to push the needle and go towards a direction where it develops the whole universe? Yes, absolutely I would. I'm really shocked that Thrawn has entered this live-action universe and we have still yet to see so little of him. And I know Ahsoka Season 2 is on its way, but I feel like there was a really large missed opportunity to bring Din Djarin and the story of Boba Fett, Bo-Katan, and all of these people in together to have something to do with Thrawn. I don't want it to be like an Avengers Endgame type situation, but I really, there were so many great characters that people were invested in, and you could have had them, and I get it, and we still might see them, we don't know. but I want to see the crew take on Thrawn. I want to see all of these unlikely people team up, and I hope that there's a chance that we still get that. Overall, I have to give this movie an 8.2 out of 10, and I feel mostly positive about it. I really do. I would go see this in theaters again. I really want to see it with my daughter. It was a lot of fun. It was a great opportunity just to expand the universe, sit back and enjoy Star Wars. Yes, do I understand why people want a little bit more stakes for a Star Wars in-theater release? Completely get that. But at the same time, it's okay to sometimes have fun. I promise y'all. And regular stories can still be just as entertaining as the ones that change the entire universe.